Stuart Gordon, the director of Fortress, The Pit and the Pendulum, and Reanimator, takes you into the dungeons of Castle Dorsino.
Castle Freak is a direct-to-video horror movie released in 1995. And with those words, everyone who owns something from the Criterion Collection has already checked out. Actually, that's not entirely true. I, for instance, own the Criterion edition of Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless. I haven't actually watched it, and I may have found it while rooting through literal garbage, but it still counts. My point is, the phrase direct-to-video horror doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. Most of these movies were awful, but it's not fair to judge a film based solely on its means of distribution. The VHS may seem obsolete today, but it brought movies to the masses like never before.
Put in a pre-recorded movie, and this Panasonic gives you hi-fi sound through your stereo.
Like the drive-ins and grindhouses of yesteryear, VHS became a platform for movies too cheap, perverse, or just plain offensive for general audiences. You know, porn. Finally, you could crank it in the comfort of your own home rather than doing it in a theater full of crusty strangers.
You must be here to fix the cable.
Lord, you can imagine where it goes from here.
He fixes the cable?
Home video eventually became a playground for slightly more respectable filmmakers. Emphasis on slightly. VHS was a haven for B-movies of all genres: action, sci-fi, and, of course, horror. Most of these movies were pretty bad, but the market had potential for greatness. That brings us to filmmaker Charles Band. After several years struggling with distributors on his own films, he decided to work outside the existing system. He founded the distribution company Empire Pictures in 1983. Empire had a few hits, most notably the cult classic Reanimator, directed by Stuart Gordon.
What are you thinking? How do you feel? You?
But a few hits just wasn't enough. Empire collapsed under crushing debt after just 6 years of operation. As all successful people do upon encountering adversity, Charles Band lowered his expectations. Band moved on to found Full Moon Features, a production company specializing in direct-to-video horror movies. He was working with much smaller budgets than before, while attempting to match the production value of his Empire projects as closely as possible. Naturally, he kept in touch with the director of one of his biggest hits.
Let's go into that. More is more. What does that mean?
Yeah.
What were you doing to us?
Well, I could never understand what that meant, less is more. I mean, that was one of those things. I guess it's some sort of parable or something. But for me, it's you've got to go beyond what people are used to. You've got to go beyond the boundaries of good taste.
It's time to say a word about Stuart Gordon. I initially pushed the script back to focus on my video for Halloween 3, and I didn't know if I'd ever revisit it. And then I read the news that Stuart Gordon had died at age 72. More than ever, this feels like an appropriate time to revisit his career. Gordon had a talent for taking material that could have been run-of-the-mill and twisting it into something brilliant. Maybe that stems from his background in avant-garde theater. When they were in college, Gordon and his wife Carolyn staged a production of Peter Pan that was so politically charged and offensive, they were arrested for obscenity. In explaining his process behind Reanimator, Gordon laid out the philosophy that defined his work. I wasn't worrying about the critics, and I didn't really expect a critical success. Because what I had set out to do was, first, to make a film that I wanted to make, and second, to make a film that I thought the fans wanted to see. Stuart Gordon knew how to satisfy an audience, but he did it on his terms. Commercially minded producers like Charles Band couldn't care less about his artistic ambition, as long as he delivered a return on their investment. Now, I'm here to criticize movies, and I try to stay positive while doing that. I'm even more careful about criticizing people on here, but I think it's fair to say that Charles Band is exclusively in it for the money. After all, he's the credited director of this year's horror comedy Corona Zombies. I say credited director because it's largely composed of recycled footage from other movies.
Goddamn Corona Zombies! Bat-suit-eating bastards from hell!
I mention this not just because it's topical, but because it gives you a pretty good idea of who we're dealing with here.
Coronavirus?
Round 0 of the virus. This was taken moments ago at the Wuhan, China soup factory.
Castle Freak originated during an unrelated meeting between Band and Gordon. Following Reanimator, the two had also worked together on a direct-to-video adaptation of The Pit and the Pendulum.
You love me. Let down or he dies.
During their chat, Gordon noticed a poster hanging on the wall bearing the title Castle Freak. Intrigued, he asked what it was about. Band helpfully explained, "That's a castle, and there's a freak." Why did I just do that voice?
Hi, I'm Charles Band, and responsible for tons of Empire and Full Moon movies you probably rented at your local video store over the years.
The movie had a poster, but it didn't even have a script yet. Band couldn't offer Gordon much money for the budget, but he did have something better. A castle. Yeah, Band owns an actual castle in Italy and uses it to shoot movies. This is his second house. When I shoot in my house, it looks like this. When Band shoots in his house, it looks like this. Best of all, Band offered Gordon the thing every filmmaker dreams of: final cut privilege. Gordon could make the movie however he wanted, and Full Moon would release it as is. Seeing that blank slate as an opportunity, Gordon hired his frequent writing collaborator Dennis Paoli to dash off a script about a castle and a freak. I'm no Hollywood insider, but even I know that scripts need to go through a revision process before they're ready to shoot. The script that I'm reading from, for instance, is my 4th draft. I would personally argue that revision is an essential step in the writing process. Unfortunately, Castle Freak tears a hole right through my theory. That's right, Gordon shot the first draft. I cannot stress enough how inadvisable that decision was, but as you're about to see, it kind of paid off.
Reanimators Jeffrey Combs and Barbara Crampton in Stuart Gordon's Castle Freak.
Okay. It is past 1 a.m. and I haven't even started talking about the movie yet, so it's gonna be a long night. Just a little something to take the edge off. We open on a castle. Don't worry, we'll get to the freak soon enough. But first, we're gonna follow this old lady on her daily routine. Ooh, maybe she's the freak. Suddenly, the movie throws us into a scene of thoughtless, inexplicable brutality. Trust me, this won't be the last time. Turns out, beating your prisoner into a pulsating lump of flesh every single day is really hard work. After decades of this routine, the old woman's heart finally gives out. On my first viewing, my mind was full of questions. Chief among them, why is this happening? Even after multiple viewings, I'm still taken aback by just how visceral this movie is. It never lets up on the brutality, but at least it offers us some explanation. The old woman was an Italian duchess who lived alone in her castle. Well, mostly alone. With no immediate family, her estate passes to John Riley, a distant relative in America. John moves into the castle with his wife Susan and daughter Rebecca while they arrange to sell the estate.
You know, when I got your letter, Mr. Giannetti, I thought it was a scam.
Scam?
Well, it's just hard to believe I've actually inherited a castle.
The protagonist moving into a mysterious relative's house is a pretty standard setup for a horror movie. It's not very original, but Castle Freak isn't here to reinvent the wheel. It's here to take you on a joyride.
What do you want?
Well, I thought since it's the first night in a new place that we could make a fresh start of it.
This spooky setup also comes with a side of deeply uncomfortable family drama. At first, I felt bad for John, until I realized that he killed their son and blinded their daughter in a drunk driving accident. Now, I'm taking Susan's side.
It's been 9 months.
I know.
I haven't touched a
I
drop.
know, you've been very good, and I know that I should try to forgive you, that I should want to forgive you, but I can't.
I feel almost dirty watching the scenes they share, like I'm overhearing a conversation that wasn't meant for me. But the family is making the best of it. They own a castle now. Might as well go exploring.
Do you need a... No, thank you.
This is a little thing, but I love how people in horror movies try to get each other's attention in the spookiest manner possible. Was she trying to scare him? I guess she just lives for that drama. That might explain why she tells John all the local gossip about the Duchess. After her American husband left her for another woman, the Duchess buried her young son Giorgio under mysterious circumstances and dismissed her entire household.
When her American left her, the Duchess went palza. Crazy. Something. They say she took revenge and killed his son.
Jesus. It was her son, too.
I'm sure none of this will turn out to be important, so let's just get back to our main characters rooting through some dead lady's belongings. Rebecca finds the Duchess's cat and follows it down to the castle's dungeons. There, she comes face to face with the freak himself, Giorgio. Alive and not exactly well, but just alive, I guess.
Daddy! Daddy!
Again with the spooky hands? What is wrong with these people? Of course, being blind, Rebecca didn't actually see Giorgio, and her parents don't believe that she found someone down there. I'm a little worried about how that shot was achieved. I hope that cat was treated well. I'm just saying that didn't look great. If it's any consolation, this was shot 25 years ago, so that cat's dead either way. The worst part is, that's probably the best meal he's had in years. Reinvigorated by all of that cat flesh, Giorgio finds the strength to break himself loose by breaking himself. Giorgio's escape coincides with John's relapse. After some heavy drinking at the local bar, he invites a prostitute over for a drink in the castle's cellars.
Please. You have to go.
Suddenly, he remembers that he's trying not to destroy his family again, and he sends her away. Unfortunately, she doesn't make it far. It turns out that woman had a son, and the police start an investigation when she doesn't come home. Not only is John the mysterious foreigner who recently moved into the local castle, he's also the last person to see her alive. That doesn't look great on a police report. Meanwhile, John's pursuing an investigation of his own. Remember the Duchess's American husband who left her for another woman? John discovers that man was his father, making him and Giorgio half-brothers.
He didn't die. She had him hid away. She made him into her whipping boy to get back at my father for leaving her.
Very clever.
When the cops find mutilated corpses in your cellar, blaming your evil half-brother isn't a great defense.
What? I didn't do this. Why would I do this?
You should be careful what you say until you talk to your lawyer.
I'm honestly shocked this movie isn't more infamous for just how disgusting it is. Oh, that reminds me. There's one other thing about Giorgio that I need to mention. I don't know if I can show this on YouTube. I mean, technically there's nothing there. What I'm trying to say is...
This man has no dick.
Yeah, it's gone. There's nothing but a stump left. Although we do get some lovingly framed shots of his scrotum, if you're into that sort of thing. Let's talk about something else.
So beautiful.
Now you can truly see.
What have you done to him?
Castle Freak wrapped up an informal trilogy that began with Reanimator and From Beyond. All three of these films were directed by Gordon, written by Paoli, and based on the works of H.P. Lovecraft. But there's one other key ingredient they all share. The pairing of Jeffrey Combs and Barbara Crampton. These two should be remembered as one of the great screen couples in film history. They jump into new roles in each film, making their collaborations totally unique. Susan is pitiful and John is just repulsive. To make matters worse, they're both negligent parents for ignoring Rebecca's warnings about a stranger in the castle.
You don't have any friends here.
A friend would believe me. Mom, you've got to listen to me. There's somebody else in the castle.
Enough of this, okay? Come on. Put your glasses on, let's go to lunch.
It may seem pretty mundane compared to the literal flesh-eating monster downstairs, but this portrait of a crumbling family is still one of the film's most unsettling elements.
You blinded Becky! You killed our son!
So what's left? You just punishing me?
Yes, because God didn't.
I might hate these people, if only I didn't feel so bad for them.
Stu has a way of, you know, keeping a set kind of light and joking and easing and laying back and making everybody feel real comfortable. And that really kind of wasn't the case on this film. It was much more serious.
As both Crampton and Combs noted behind-the-scenes interviews, this was a very different experience from their earlier collaborations. Yes, Reanimator and From Beyond were both bizarre, gruesome movies, but they were also vibrant and campy.
In From Beyond, we had a title for Stuart, and our title was More is Not Enough. More blood, more slime, more screaming!
Gordon took a much darker approach for Castle Freak. This is funny. But this is just upsetting. This brings us to the central figure of the story. Most monsters fall into one of two categories. For a really simple example of this, let's take a look at the Universal adaptations of Dracula and Frankenstein. Dracula is our first type of monster. He's a predator. Don't let his intelligence fool you, he is functionally the same as the shark from Jaws. He acts purely on violent instinct without a shred of humanity. Frankenstein's monster is on the opposite end of the spectrum. He's not a predator, he's a victim. He only kills by accident or when he's provoked. His monstrous qualities are forgivable because the audience sympathizes with him. Giorgio is a lot harder to classify. Yes, he terrorizes an innocent girl, he beats an old woman to death with a chain, and he eats nipples like they're fucking pepperoni. He's a monster. But how could he be anything else considering what happened to him? Confined from a young age, beaten and mutilated by his mother. violence was his only source of human contact. He's impossible to love. But when I see this photo of him as a child, and I understand what was taken from him, I can't really hate him either. That's why Castle Freak sticks with me. Perhaps more than any other film I've seen, it invites us to contemplate the horror of being the monster, the hopelessness of his existence. To imagine yourself within this mutilated shell.
The design for the Freak was derived out of what would it be like to be locked in a cave for 40 years and on a daily basis be tortured, beat, and pummeled. What would somebody like that look like? What would that be like?
Beyond the eye-popping effects, that's the real horror of Castle Freak. This is the story of how a man can be reduced to a monster. Of how suffering perpetuates itself from person to person. John is only different from Giorgio in that he's not so far gone.
This is different.
No, it's always the same. It's never your fault. Your father was responsible for your drinking problem. The university fired you because you were politically incorrect. And now you're trying to use JJ's
No,
fault.
I'm not.
Yes, you are.
He still has the opportunity to turn back. To heal from his pain, rather than inflicting it on his family. Thankfully, there aren't too many Giorgios out there in the world. But there are a lot of people like John. Shit, this is getting a little too real. Let's not forget that Castle Freak is also a really fun, nasty experience for horror fans. Like many of my favorite films, it stands at the crossroads of artistic ambition and popcorn-munching perversion. This is an incredible success story. A brilliant horror movie emerging on home video, even as the genre was hitting a low point in mainstream success.
Meet me tonight at 9 o'clock at the campus rally.
Chubby, wait! Wait!
I am grateful for the entire cast and crew who spent a month in some rich weirdo's castle to give us this movie.
You know, every good castle is haunted, every good castle has a ghost. And so this castle in Jove has one as well, of a little girl who is heard sometimes at night crying.
More than ever, I think it's appropriate to celebrate the director.
There was something that we always said about him, which is very in keeping with what we're talking about right now. More is not enough. More blood, more scariness.
An actor's credo is less is more.
Yes.
Stewart, it's more is...
More screaming.
More is more.
Stuart Gordon has several cult classics to his name prior to his work with Full Moon. While other filmmakers would have turned their noses up at the prospect of direct-to-video work, Gordon embraced the minuscule budget in exchange for creative control. Rather than seeing all of the limitations, he just saw opportunity. Castle Freak stands toe-to-toe with his earlier theatrical work and even represents a bold new direction in his career. Like its title character, the film is nasty, unruly, and thoroughly unpredictable, yet oddly compelling.
So you, Giovanni, are the bastard.